I'm getting to the point of buttoning this engine back up. I got to put the valve cover back on, but I thought I would show a little bit about the cam and the oil passages. So if you take the caps off, you can see on the left that there's a center groove and then two little angle grooves that come out of there. So those are the squirters on the angle grooves. So the center groove aligns with this groove in the cam. So you got oil coming up from the bottom of that bearing surface below it. And when this cam rotates, this section fills with oil, and when it lines perfectly, it squirts up through into the center and then out through these squirters on the sides. So what it's going to do is send a shot out like this, and that's going to lube the rollers and the cam every revolution of the cam, but it's not 100% of the time. It's only when this vertical groove lines up with the bottom hole and the squirter hole and shoots that oil through. Otherwise, it's just lubricating the bottom of the cam bearing surface until it comes back around to the groove, and then it shoots back out and hits those two lobes. So that's how our heads work. Also notice on the cam caps that there is an F with an arrow. So that's pointing towards the number 1 cylinder on the head. So when you put these on, it's important that you get it on the right side. You get it wrong, obviously you're not going to have any lubrication. So right now I've oiled all the lobes so I have some lubrication when I start turning the cam. But I've got the cam at top dead center, and when I spin the oil pump, you'll see that nothing's really coming out of the squirters. All you're getting is some oil coming out around the cam shaft. I realize a lot of people aren't going to be going back to the old videos. I thought I would show how I'm priming the oil system. And the way I do it is I take a cordless drill. I've got an adapter on the end, a 1/2-inch socket adapter, a long shaft, and a wobble socket, 18 millimeter. I hate trying to do things one-armed. So I bring it up through the just in front of the front tire at an angle, and with the timing belt off, I'm able to get it on the intermediate shaft, turn it clockwise, and that's enough to prime your engine. You can see the oil is squirting out around the camshaft, but it's not coming out the squirters. So what I'll do is I'll turn the cam a few degrees and see what happens then. You can see it shooting out here as long as it was on that cut. So that's how our cam is lubricated. So as you can see from that 30 seconds of spinning the intermediate shaft, I'm now at about 65 psi of oil pressure. And that was on low speed on the drill. So you don't need a lot of spinning to develop oil pressure. I thought I'd do an experiment on oil flow from the accumulator. So it's been sitting overnight at 65 psi. So I'm going to fire the solenoid, which will open it and let the oil in the accumulator dump into the oiling system of the engine, and we'll see if we get any discharge coming out of the cam journals. So as you can see, we have oil flow. So the only thing that won't get lubed are the lobes on the cams and the rollers. But you do have to the journals. So at least that's something. You know the crank bearings are getting lubed. Time to mount the valve cover, but I know I'm going to have to take it off again to retorque the head after I've driven it for a little bit. And this is the gasket that's, I think it's a Felpro kit it comes with. It's okay, it's much better than the original cork gaskets, but the problem is it's tough to get it to stay in the grooves unless you put some tack on there and get it in place, but then it's always got a little bit of a not clean fit. So what I'm thinking of doing is getting rid of this and going to the Permatex Ultra Black. In this case it's the 82180. I've had good luck with this before, but I've used it on my oil pan. Sealed well, but the problem is it's tough to get the oil pan back off. So my thought is I want to be able to take the valve cover back off. So what I'm thinking of doing is cleaning the surface off, putting some WD-40 or a light oil coat on there, just enough that it lubricates it, but it doesn't create a bubble like there is right here. So just to put a film on there. And then I'll clean the valve cover really well, lay the sealant into the groove so that it protrudes out of the groove about 1/8 of an inch. Mount the valve cover on loosely, but so that it compresses that gasket material evenly all the way around. So once I lightly tighten the valve cover down, I'll leave it sit overnight, let that material cure up, and then the next morning I'll remove the valve cover, clean this surface really well to get the oil off it, and then put the valve cover back on and torque it down. But that way I should have a nice smooth surface on the head side, and it should be stuck to the valve cover, and then if I remove it from the head, the gasket material should come off with the valve cover. At least that's my intent. But it's just something I wanted to try because I hate doing valve cover gaskets. They're always a pain. I put enough sealant in that when I lightly torque these bolts down, you can just see it starting to squeak out going around the valve cover. So now I'm going to let it sit overnight. When I open it up, if there's any low spots, I'll hit them again and redo it. But hopefully this won't stick to the head, and then I'll have a nice gasket that I can compress further and really get a good seal on. Well, that didn't work very well. After 2 days of sitting, it came apart. You can see this isn't even hardened yet. So it did come apart nice. I didn't have to fight it. You can see it didn't stick to a lot of the surfaces, but some of it did. But again, this is all wet. Alright, what I think I'll try doing this time, since the other gasket wouldn't set up, it would just stay liquid in the center, I guess because there's so much of it. What I want to do this time is I put a thin bead in that hardened and that's almost flush with the base of the valve cover. So what I'm going to do now is go back in with a razor blade and smooth it off so there's no indentations. No raised edges, no indentations. And then I'll go back and redo a thin bead all the way around, put it back on the valve, on the head, and then see what that does, if that makes it easier to remove. I'll have a thin coat of oil on the head surface, and like I did last time. But the problem I had last time when I tried this is it separated in here because it was just so much material. It wasn't hardening. It was like being inside the tube. So give it a shot and we'll see what happens. What I've done on the valve cover gasket, I left what was sticking out of the valve cover groove alone, and I just trimmed everything with a razor blade. I did it as flat as I could. You can see there's still some voids in here, but that's fine. So I've got it this far. So now what I'm going to do is put another bead on top of this one and then stick it back on the engine on the head. And of course I'll coat the head again like I did before, all the surfaces, with a thin coat of oil. And then I'll crush this down as hard as it'll go. So my thinking is, being that I've cut the amount of material by about, well, at least half of what was sticking out of it before, this is already cured, so whatever else goes on there will be able to cure pretty quickly, at least overnight probably. And that way I won't have that big mass that's going to just stay uncured for a long time. Hopefully with the thin coating of oil on the valve, on the head, the valve cover won't stick to it really good. So when I have to take it off to retorque the head, it'll pop off pretty easily. And then hopefully from there I'll have a reusable valve cover gasket that I won't have to keep redoing each time. So that's the hope. Not sure if that'll work or not, but I keep plugging away with ideas. One other thing I should mention, if you've got the cast valve cover, to make sure you put silicone adhesive in around this plate, because if you don't, you're going to get blow-by coming out the back. It'll leak oil and make a mess. So that's one way to help solve that, is to seal that ridge all the way around. Obviously you've still got some holes in it. I'm not eliminating them. So don't know if it would be a bad idea or a good idea to plug up the bottom holes, but I'm not touching them. I'm just going to do it the way it was recommended. I think I read that on Donovan's Dodge Garage years ago, that was a good fix if you got oil coming out the vent port. Alright, I've got the valve cover back on. As you can see, there's squeeze out all the way around, just a little bit though, not a huge amount like you would get if you did a big gasket. So what I'm going to do is clean that up, and so it won't be visible. One thing I like to use are these tub of towels. I've also tried the scrubs, but I kind of like the tub of towels. They're a little bit finer, and I use them for cleaning my hands all the time, and they're good for cleaning up things like that. Now I've got the valve cover cleaned up, so it's nice and pretty, and we'll see after I get the car running, which will be weeks down the road probably, and retorque the head, how good my thoughts are on this. But I'm hoping. I hate doing valve cover gaskets. So that's it for this week. Hopefully you'll find something I've covered useful, but I keep learning, so hopefully you do too.